Commander Vezix of the Galactic Armada tapped his 4 claws against the metallic briefing table, making a rhythmic clicking sound that conveyed his growing impatience. His violet eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic projection of the newly discovered planet Earth, a primitive rock in the distant arm of the Milky Way galaxy that had somehow managed to produce beings that called themselves humans. "So you are telling me," Vezix said, stretching out his words with obvious skepticism, "that these soft, fleshy creatures with no natural armor, no claws and pathetic sensory capabilities have developed interplanetary travel?" Lieutenant Krall nodded eagerly, his antennas bobbing with excitement. "Yes, Commander, their technology is remarkably advanced considering their physical limitations. They've already established colonies on their neighboring planet and moon." "How terrifying," Vezix replied, his mandibles clicking together in what passed for laughter among the Asurlathian species. "They can visit their immediate celestial neighbors. Should we surrender now or wait until they discover faster-than-light travel in another 1,000 cycles? The 6 other military officials gathered around the table joined in the mockery, their various appendages and breathing apparatus shaking with amusement. Only Science Officer Neela remained silent, her luminescent blue skin pulsating with concern. "Commander," she ventured, her melodic voice cutting through the derision, "I believe we should not dismiss the humans so quickly. Our preliminary analysis suggests they possess unusual qualities." "Such as?" Vezix asked, waving a dismissive claw. Neela manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on various human settlements across Earth. "They are remarkably adaptable. While individually weak compared to most sentient species we've encountered, they demonstrate extraordinary resilience and resourcefulness." "Officer Neela," interrupted General Thrax, his scaled face contorted into what passed for a smile among his species. "I appreciate scientific thoroughness, but let's be practical. Look at them. No natural weapons, no significant strength, poor visual and auditory range. They are practically defenseless. And yet," Neela continued undeterred, "they've become the dominant species on a planet filled with predators far stronger and faster than themselves." Vezix sighed dramatically. "Fine, we will proceed with caution, but I'm not wasting significant resource on this. Lieutenant Krall, prepare a small invasion force. Let's capture a few specimens, assess their capabilities and determine if they possess any resources worth harvesting." "Yes, Commander," Krall saluted enthusiastically, his exoskeleton clicking as he straightened. "1 battlecruiser should be sufficient." Vezix added, already turning his attention to other matters on his agenda. "And send some of the cadets. They could use the field experience and it's not like they will face any real danger." "Permission to join the mission, Commander?" Neela requested, her skin now pulsing with a mix of blue and green hues that reflected her scientific curiosity. "Granted," Vezix replied with a careless wave, "document everything for the archives. Who knows, perhaps these humans will provide some amusement before we add their planet to the Empire." 3 solar cycles later, Cadet Zorn stood nervously at his station aboard the battlecruiser Inevitable Victory. As the newest and youngest member of the invasion force, he had been assigned to monitor communications, a position considered safe and relatively unimportant for this particular mission. "Excited for your first conquest, youngling?" asked Sergeant Drax, a hulking Mantidean warrior whose exoskeleton bore the scars of a dozen successful planetary invasions. "Yes, Sergeant," Zorn replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the nervous twitching of his secondary antennae. "Though I'm not sure monitoring communications counts as conquest." Drax laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "True enough, but we all start somewhere. I was once assigned to prisoner processing on my first mission. Spent 3 cycles cataloging the possessions of captives before I got to see any action." "Was that also against a primitive species?" Zorn asked, genuinely curious. "No," Drax admitted, his compound eyes gleaming with anticipation. "The Regulans had energy weapons and rudimentary shield technology. They put up a decent fight. These humans, from what I've heard, they are barely past combustion engines and projectile weapons." The cruiser's commander, Captain Yours, approached their station. Unlike many officers who treated cadets with disdain, Yours had a reputation for mentoring young soldiers. "Don't underestimate any species, no matter how primitive they appear," Yours cautioned, his voice surprisingly soft for a being with such formidable natural armor. The archives are full of accounts of technologically superior forces defeated by resourceful primitives. With respect, Captain, Drax said, those are mostly propaganda tales meant to keep soldiers vigilant. The reality is that superior firepower almost always prevails. Perhaps? Yours conceded. But vigilance costs nothing and may save your life. Remember that, Cadet Zorn. Zorn nodded respectfully. Yes, Captain. The ship's announcement system crackled to life. Attention all personnel, we will be entering Earth's orbit in approximately 30 minutes. Invasion teams, report to your designated assembly areas. Science Division, prepare for preliminary scans. Zorn felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety ripple through his nervous system. Though his role was minor, he would still be witnessing his first planetary invasion, the beginning of his military career and his contribution to the ever-expanding Galactic Armada. I should return to my station, Captain Yord said. Cadet, maintain open channels for all ground teams. Sergeant, your squad will deploy with the second wave, correct? Yes, Captain, Drax confirmed. Once the initial force secures the landing zone, we will move in to establish the forward base. Yoris nodded and departed, leaving Zorn alone with the imposing sergeant. Remember, Cadet, Drax said, his voice lowered. No matter what the captain says, this is going to be an easy victory. These humans have never encountered superior species. They will be too busy staring in awe at our technology to mount any effective resistance. The inevitable victory entered Earth's orbit undetected, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to the primitive radar systems of the humans. Science Officer Neela stood on the observation deck, watching the blue-green planet rotate slowly beneath them. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said behind her. Neela turned to see Lieutenant Kral joining her at the viewport. Yes, quite remarkable biodiversity. Their oceans alone contain millions of unique species. Not what I meant, Kral clarified, his antennae wiggling with amusement. I was referring to the beauty of a pristine conquest. An entire planet of beings who have no idea their status in the universe is about to change forever. Neela's skin darkened slightly, indicating disapproval. We are here to assess and gather intelligence, Lieutenant. The commander specifically ordered minimal intervention. Of course. Kral agreed hurriedly. No unnecessary casualties. But surely you understand the thrill of being part of such a momentous encounter. The first contact between our glorious empire and this isolated species. I understand the scientific significance. Neela replied coolly. And I hope everyone else remembers that significance as well. The humans may be technologically inferior, but every sentient species deserves basic respect. Kral made a dismissive gesture with his upper limbs. Respect is earned, Officer Neela. The strong survive and the weak serve. That's the natural order of the universe and the foundation of our empire. Before Neela could respond, the ship's alert system activated. All personnel, initial scans complete. First deployment team, prepare for landing. Target area identified as Northern Continental United States. Low population density, minimal detection risk. That's my cue, Kral said, straightening his uniform. I will be overseeing the first landing party. Lieutenant. Neela called as he turned to leave. Please remember, these are sentient beings we are studying, not resources to be harvested. Kral paused, then offered what passed for a smile among his species. Of course, Science Officer. We will be the very model of interstellar diplomacy. As he departed, Neela couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Something about this mission felt wrong, though she couldn't articulate why. The humans were indeed primitive compared to the Galactic Armada, but something in their historical record suggested a capacity for adaptation and ferocity that worried her. She turned back to the viewport, watching clouds swirl across Earth's atmosphere. May wisdom guide us, she whispered, an ancient Zoroastrian prayer rarely uttered in military vessels. The first landing party consisted of 20 soldiers, primarily scouts and reconnaissance specialists, along with 3 science officers and Lieutenant Kral. They deployed in the early hours of Earth's morning, their shuttle descending silently into a heavily forested area far from major human settlements. Aboard the inevitable Victory, Cadet Zorn monitored their communications with rapt attention. Ground Team Alpha to inevitable victory, Lieutenant Kral's voice came through clearly. Touchdown successful. No signs of detection. Beginning perimeter establishment. Acknowledged, Ground Team Alpha. Captain Yours replied from the command deck. Maintain stealth protocols and proceed with reconnaissance. For the next hour, Zorn listened as the ground team set up their base camp and began preliminary surveys of the surrounding area. The reports were mundane, almost boring atmospheric composition analysis, soil samples, cataloging of local flora and fauna. Then the first human sighting was reported. Command, we have visual on 2 human specimens approximately 500 meters from our position, reported Scout Leader Vex. They appear to be engaged in some form of recreational activity involving artificial projectiles and targets. Observe but do not engage, Captain Yours instructed. Record all behavior patterns. Acknowledged, Vex responded. They seem to be using primitive kinetic weapons. Projectiles launched by chemical explosions, extremely inefficient and loud. Are they military personnel? Yours asked. Negative, Captain. Based on our briefings, their attire suggests civilian status. 1 juvenile, 1 adult, likely a training or bonding ritual. Sergeant Drax, who had been standing near Zorn's station, snorted derisively. Primitive weapons training. How quaint. The juvenile human demonstrates surprisingly accurate aim, Vex continued his report. They appear to be communicating verbally between shots. Can you isolate their communication? Neela's voice joined the channel. Attempting now, Science Officer. After a moment of static, human voices could be heard through the transmission. The sounds were strange to Zorn's auditory receptors. Higher pitched than most galactic standard languages, with unusual emphasis patterns. That's it, Tommy. Remember what I showed you about breathing? And, hold. Squeeze the trigger. Excellent shot. Did you see that, Dad? Right in the bullseye. I sure did, son. Your grandpa would be proud. He was a Marine sniper, you know. You think I could be a sniper someday? With that aim, the military would be lucky to have you, but let's hope the world stays peaceful enough that you never need those skills. The transmission cut off and Vex's voice returned. Primitive but clear familial bonding over potential combat skills. Interesting cultural observation. Continue monitoring, Yords ordered, but maintain your distance. Unfortunately, the universe rarely accommodates military plans perfectly. Just as Vex acknowledged the order, another voice broke into the communication channel, urgent and alarmed. Command. Scouts, Xerix here. We have a situation. A human vehicle has approached from the north. 4 occupants, all wearing what appears to be organized attire consistent with their military patterns. Captain Yours leaned closer to his communication panel. Have you been detected? Negative, Captain. They appear to be conducting some form of patrol or training exercise. Current trajectory will bring them within visual range of our landing site in approximately 20 minutes. Lieutenant Kral, Yours addressed the ground team leader. Options? We could relocate, Captain. Kral replied, but dismantling our equipment would take at least 30 minutes. Alternatively, we could neutralize the approaching humans. Neutralize, Neela interrupted. Lieutenant, need I remind you our mission parameters specifically prohibit unnecessary engagement. 4 humans who've spotted an alien base camp would hardly qualify as unnecessary. Science Officer, Kral countered. The security of our mission must take priority. Captain Yours was silent for a moment, considering. Finally he said, Lieutenant, prepare your team for possible encounter, but do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Scout Xerix, continue monitoring the humans' approach. If they change course away from our position, take no action. Yes, Captain, both acknowledged simultaneously. Zorn glanced at Sergeant Drax, whose expression had shifted from boredom to interest. Things might get entertaining after all, the veteran soldier muttered. For 15 tense minutes, Scout Xerix provided updates as the human vehicle continued its approach through the forest. The 4 humans inside were described as wearing matching green and brown patterned clothing, carrying equipment, and frequently consulting what appeared to be communication devices. 5 minutes until visual contact, Captain, Xerix reported. They show no signs of altering course. Lieutenant Kral, Captain Yours said, prepare for first contact protocol. Captain, Kral responded, sounding surprised. With respect, these are clearly military personnel. First contact should be conducted with their planetary leadership, not random soldiers. Under ideal circumstances, yes. Yours agreed, but circumstances are rarely ideal. These humans will discover our presence regardless. Better to control that discovery than react to it. And if they respond with hostility, Kral asked, then you are authorized to defend yourselves with minimal force. Yours stated firmly. Stun weapons only. I want prisoners, not casualties. Understood, Captain. Zorn noticed Sergeant Drax shaking his head slightly. Too cautious, the veteran muttered. A show of overwhelming force would establish dominance immediately. Wouldn't that risk unnecessary conflict? Zorn asked quietly. Drax fixed his compound eyes on the young cadet. There's no such thing as unnecessary conflict. Youngling, only conflict and submission. The humans will submit eventually. The question is how many need to die before they accept that reality. Before Zorn could respond, Scout Zarex's urgent voice filled the communication channel. Captain, the humans have spotted our perimeter sensors. They've stopped their vehicle and are approaching on foot. They appear cautious but not alarmed. They probably think it's some kind of weather equipment or wildlife monitoring, another voice suggested. Lieutenant Kral. Captain Yours ordered. Initiate first contact procedure 3. Non-threatening display of superior technology. Acknowledged, Captain, moving into position now. Zorn listened intently as the ground team prepared to reveal themselves to humans for the first time in Earth's history. Despite his junior status, he recognized the significance of this moment. The course of an entire planet's destiny was about to change forever. The humans are 30 meters from the camp perimeter, Scout Zarex reported. They've stopped and appear to be discussing something. One is using a handheld device, possibly communicating with others. Activate the translator. Kral ordered. Let's hear what they are saying. After a brief moment of adjustment, human voices came through the communication channel. Definitely not Forest Service equipment. Look at these readings, Sarge. Whatever this is, it's putting out energy signatures like nothing I've ever seen. Could be experimental. Area 51 isn't that far from here. Should we call it in? Yeah, but don't mention energy signatures over an open channel. Just report on unidentified equipment and possible unauthorized personnel. Lieutenant, Captain Yord said. They are alerting others to your presence. Proceed with contact immediately. Understood, Captain. Moving now. For several seconds only tense breathing and the soft sound of movement came through the channel. Then Kral spoke, his voice clear and commanding. Attention, humans of Earth, do not be alarmed. We are representatives of the Galactic Armada, here to establish peaceful contact with your species. The humans' reactions came immediately. Holy shit. Weapons ready. Form perimeter. What the hell are those things? Don't fire unless fired upon. Jenkins, get on the radio now. Lieutenant Kral continued, apparently unfazed by their alarm. Your primitive weapons are no threat to us. We intend no harm if you cooperate. Please, surrender your devices and accompany us for brief questioning. Like hell we will. One human voice responded, deeper and more authoritative than the others. This is United States military territory. You are the ones who need to identify yourselves properly and state your intentions. Captain Yors's voice cut in. Lieutenant, they seem confused rather than intimidated. Try explaining our technological superiority more clearly. Humans? Kral began again. Your species development level is categorized as pre-interstellar technology level 6. The Galactic Armada operates at technology level 19. To demonstrate, a high-pitched whine came through the audio, followed by exclamations from the humans. What the? Take cover. Jenkins, is that radio working yet? Negative, Sarge. All communications are dead. That was merely a localized electromagnetic pulse. Kral explained, satisfaction evident in his voice. A simple demonstration of our capabilities. Now please surrender your weapons and... The sharp crack of projectile weapons interrupted him, followed by the unmistakable sound of energy shields activating. Captain, Kral reported, his voice tense but controlled. The humans have initiated hostile action. Request permission to neutralize. Granted, Yours replied grimly. Non-lethal methods only. What followed was a cacophony of sounds, human weapons firing, energy weapons discharging, shouts of confusion and pain. Zorn listened in growing horror as what should have been a peaceful first contact deteriorated into violence. 3 humans neutralized, Kral reported after what seemed like an eternity. 1 has escaped into the forest. Scout team in pursuit. Capture if possible. Yords ordered. What is the condition of the neutralized humans? Unconscious but stable, Captain. Our stun weapons functioned as expected. Science Officer Neela, report to the landing site with a medical team, Yords commanded. I want those humans treated and prepared for questioning once they regain consciousness. Yes, Captain. Neela replied, her voice tight with what Zorn recognized as disapproval. Captain. Kral interjected, the escaped human is proving difficult to track. They seem to have knowledge of evasion techniques in the local terrain. Continue the pursuit, Yorders ordered. We cannot allow them to alert others to our presence. Sergeant Drax leaned close to Zorn's station. So much for the peaceful approach, he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. This is how it always begins. Soon the real invasion will commence. Zorn looked up at the veteran soldier, troubled by his eagerness for escalation. But surely we don't want war with the humans. Drax's mandibles clicked in amusement. War? No, youngling. War implies 2 somewhat equal forces in conflict. What's coming isn't war. It's subjugation. The natural order of the universe asserting itself once again. As if to punctuate Drax's prediction, Scout Zerix's frantic voice suddenly filled the communication channel. Captain, the escaped human has reached another vehicle. They are departing at high speed on what appears to be a main transportation route. Intercept them. Kral ordered. Impossible, sir. They've already cleared visual range, and our pursuit equipment is still being unloaded from the shuttle. Captain Yors's voice remained calm despite the crisis. Lieutenant, secure your current position and the human prisoners. Prepare for immediate extraction if necessary. I'm alerting all ships in the fleet to battle readiness. Zorn felt a cold sensation creep through his nervous system. What had begun as a simple reconnaissance mission was rapidly evolving into something much more dangerous, and somewhere on the planet below, a single human soldier was racing to alert their kind to the presence of aliens. The quiet mission just got noisy. Sergeant Drax observed, his battle-scarred exoskeleton gleaming under the ship's lights. Now we will see what these humans are really made of. As the communication channel filled with urgent preparations and contingency plans, Zern couldn't help but wonder if the Galactic Armada had gravely underestimated their supposedly primitive adversaries. The escaped human had already done what none of them thought possible. Evaded the advanced scouts of the galaxy's most feared military force. Commander Vezix isn't going to be pleased, Zorn murmured, almost to himself. Rex's harsh laugh made him flinch. On the contrary, Cadet. Now he gets, send in the real soldiers. This planet will be under Imperial control before the next cycle ends. But something in the veteran's tone suggested uncertainty, a flicker of doubt that Soren had never heard for. It seemed that even Sergeant Rax, veteran of a dozen successful invasions, wasn't entirely convinced of their inevitable victory. And as reports continued to stream in from the increasingly chaotic situation on Earth's surface, Zorn began to understand why the humans weren't reacting with the panic and awe that primitive species usually displayed when confronted with advanced technology. They were adapting, organizing, and preparing to fight back. The laughter that had filled the briefing room days earlier now seemed premature at best, dangerously arrogant at worst. The human soldier they had dismissed as a primitive curiosity was proving to be something else entirely, something dangerous. The inevitable victory hummed with frantic activity as battle stations were manned and invasion plans hastily revised. What had begun as a simple reconnaissance mission was rapidly spiraling into a full-scale military engagement. Commander Vezaz had been notified of the situation, and his response had been predictably explosive. You lost control of a single primitive human. His holographic image towered over Captain Yora's on the command deck, mandibles clicking furiously. A creature with no natural defenses, no significant strength and primitive technology escaped your elite scouts. The situation developed rapidly. Commander, Yours replied, maintaining his composure despite the public dressing down. The human displayed unexpected tactical knowledge and familiarity with the terrain. Excuses. Vezix spat. I want this containment breach sealed immediately. How many local authorities have been alerted? Science Officer Neela stepped forward. Based on our monitoring of their communication channels, the escaped human has made contact with a military installation approximately 50 kilometers from the landing site. They are deploying what they call special forces to investigate. Vezix's compound eyes narrowed. Special forces, what does that designation indicate? Unknown, Commander, Neil admitted. But intercepted communications suggest they are treating this as a high-priority security incident. Not a scientific curiosity as we had anticipated. Of course they are, Vezix said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Finding aliens in their forest tends to raise security concerns. Captain Yours, you have two options. Extract your ground team immediately and we will select a new landing site, or commit additional forces and establish a proper beachhead. Captain Yours exchanged glances with his bridge officers before responding, Commander. With respect, immediate extraction might prove more problematic than commitment. The humans now know of our existence. If we retreat, they will have time to prepare worldwide defenses. Are you suggesting a primitive species could pose a threat to the Armada? Vezix asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Not at all, Commander, Yours replied smoothly. But unnecessary complications waste resources. A swift, overwhelming display of force now would likely result in quicker surrender negotiations. Vezix was silent for a moment. Considering, very well, I'm dispatching 3 additional battlecruisers to your position. Sergeant Major Greel will assume command of ground operations. Captain Yours, you will provide orbital support and coordination. Yes, Commander, Yours acknowledged, hiding his relief at not being summarily demoted or worse. And Captain? Vezix added, his holographic image already beginning to fade. No more mistakes. The next officer who underestimates these humans will be recycled for protein paste. Is that clear? Crystal clear, Commander. As the transmission ended, the bridge crew collectively relaxed their postures slightly. Captain Yoris turned to find Science Officer Neela looking troubled. Something to add, Officer Neela? Yes, Captain, she said, her skin pulsing with bands of deep blue concern. I believe we are still underestimating these humans. Their historical records show an unusual propensity for adaptation under pressure, and their response to threats tends to be disproportionate. Meaning they don't just defend, they often counterattack with escalating force. It's a pattern repeated throughout their brief but extraordinarily violent history. Captain Yours considered her words carefully. Your concern is noted, Science Officer. But the technological gap between our civilizations is insurmountable. Their most advanced weapons are centuries behind our standard equipment. Technology isn't everything, Captain Neela insisted. The archives contain numerous accounts of technologically superior forces defeated by resourceful primitives. Yes, you've mentioned that, Yours interrupted. But those are isolated incidents, not the norm. Now please focus on analyzing the captured humans. I want to know everything about their physiology, psychology and tactical capabilities before Sergeant Major Greel arrives. As Neela departed the bridge, Cadet Zorn watched from his communications station with growing unease. Unlike most of the crew who viewed the situation as a minor complication in an otherwise routine mission, Zorn sensed something more ominous unfolding. Worried, youngling? Sergeant Drax asked, noticing his expression. No, Sergeant. Zorn replied automatically. Just focused on my duties. Drax made a clicking sound of amusement. Lies don't become an officer candidate. You are concerned about these humans, aren't you? Zorn hesitated, then decided honesty might be less dangerous than transparent deception. I'm concerned about our approach, Sergeant. We've gone from observation to engagement without sufficient intelligence. A valid tactical concern, Drax acknowledged, surprising Zorn. But ultimately irrelevant. Once Sergeant Major Greel arrives with reinforcements, these humans will learn their place in the galactic hierarchy. And if they resist, Drax's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. Then they will be the first to test our new planetary pacification protocols. Either way, the outcome is predetermined. Zorn nodded dutifully. But as he returned his attention to monitoring communications, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unpredictable was brewing on the blue-green planet below. In the medical bay of the inevitable victory, Science Officer Neela carefully examined the 3 captured humans. They remained unconscious, their vital signs monitored by equipment calibrated to their unusual physiology. "Fascinating," she murmured, reviewing the scan results. "Their cellular structure is remarkably similar to several other carbon-based species, yet with unique variations I've never encountered before. Any immediate threats we should be aware of?" asked Medical Officer Pell, who was assisting with the examination. "Pathogens, biological defenses, that sort of thing." "Nothing significant," Neela replied. "Their immune systems are quite robust for a species at their development stage, but our standard decontamination protocols are more than sufficient." She moved to the 3rd examination table where the oldest of the captured humans lay. According to his identification documents, his name was Master Sergeant Franklin Cooper, United States Army Rangers. "This one's brain activity is different from the others," Neela noted. "More organized, even in unconsciousness. And look at these scarring patterns." Pell leaned closer to examine the human's exposed skin. "Multiple healed injuries, some appear to be from their primitive projectile weapons, others from bladed implements. A warrior with significant combat experience," Neela concluded. "Exactly the type of specimen we need to understand their military capabilities." The human's eyes suddenly snapped open, causing both aliens to step back in surprise. Unlike many species who would be disoriented after being stunned, the human's gaze was immediately alert and calculating. "Well, this is different," Master Sergeant Cooper said, his voice remarkably steady. "Can't say I've ever been abducted by bugs before." The translation device rendered his speech perfectly, though Neela noted his use of the term bugs was likely derogatory. She decided to ignore the provocation. "You are aboard the Galactic Armada vessel Inevitable Victory," she informed him. "I am Science Officer Neela, and this is Medical Officer Pell. We mean you no harm." Cooper looked pointedly at his restraints, then back at Neela. "Yeah, I can tell you are real friendly folks. That's why you shot me and my team, then strapped us down for a chat." "A regrettable misunderstanding," Neela said smoothly. "Your soldiers initiated hostile action when our scouts attempted peaceful contact." Cooper actually laughed, a sound that made Pell's antennae twitch nervously. "Lady, when armed unknowns approach a military patrol and start making demands, that's not peaceful contact, that's an ambush." "An interesting perspective," Neela replied, "but ultimately irrelevant. Your species' first official contact with the Galactic Armada has already been compromised. We now seek to understand your military capabilities to determine the most appropriate approach moving forward." "In other words, you want to know how hard we will fight back when you invade," Cooper translated bluntly. "Let me save you some time. Harder than you can possibly imagine." Peltz made a dismissive sound. "Your species' confidence is misplaced. Your most advanced weapons are toys compared to Armada technology." Cooper turned his attention to the medical officer, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You know what's funny about humans? Throughout our entire history, we've been killing each other with whatever we had available. Rocks, sticks, swords, guns, bombs. We've gotten really good at finding ways to hurt things that threaten us." "Primitive violence is hardly a unique evolutionary trait," Pell responded. "Maybe not," Cooper agreed, "but our creativity might be. See, the problem with being the most advanced kid on the block is you get complacent. When was the last time your fancy armada had to really improvise? To make weapons out of whatever was at hand?" Neela noticed the human's heart rate and respiration remained perfectly steady despite the tension of the conversation. No signs of stress or fear. Unusual for a captured specimen. "Your psychological warfare attempts are noted, Sergeant Cooper," she said. "But they won't affect our mission parameters." Cooper smiled, and something in that expression made Neela's skin ripple with an involuntary warning pattern. "This isn't psychological warfare, ma'am. This is just a friendly warning from one soldier to another. Whatever you are planning, you better bring everything you've got, because the minute your boots hit our dirt in force, you will be facing the most tenacious, spiteful, creative killers this galaxy has ever seen." "Bold words from a restrained prisoner," Pell observed. "These restraints are temporary," Cooper replied, still unnervingly calm. and so is your advantage. Before either alien could respond, the medical bay doors slid open to admit Captain Yours. Officer Neela, we've detected unusual movement patterns from the human military units near our landing site. They appear to be. He stopped, noticing the conscious human. I see our guest has awakened. Captain Yours, Neela began. This is Master Sergeant Franklin Cooper, United States Army Rangers. The human interrupted. And you must be the man in charge of this circus. Yours approached the examination table, studying Cooper with obvious curiosity. Remarkable. No signs of fear or disorientation after stun exposure. Your species has impressive neurological resilience. We are full of surprises, Cooper replied dryly. Indeed, including your groundside forces' current activities. George said, rather than concentrating your troops as expected, they are dispersing into small units and adopting unusual movement patterns. A flicker of something satisfaction perhaps crossed Cooper's face. Standard counter-extraterrestrial invasion protocols. There was a moment of silence as the three aliens processed this statement. Finally, Captain Yord spoke, his tone carefully neutral. Are you suggesting your military has established procedures specifically for repelling alien invasions? Cooper's smile widened. Captain, we've been making movies about kicking alien ass for over a century. You think we didn't make some plans just in case? The moment your boy showed up in our forest, every contingency we've ever dreamed up went into effect. Preposterous, Pell sputtered. Your species only recently discovered spaceflight. You couldn't possibly have prepared for interstellar threats. We didn't need to meet aliens to imagine fighting them, Cooper explained. Humanity's greatest talent is anticipating threats, especially unlikely ones. We've wargamed everything from zombie apocalypses to robot uprisings to, yes, alien invasions. Neela noticed Captain Yors's posture had stiffened slightly. Despite his outward calm, she could tell Cooper's words had unsettled him. These fictional scenarios hardly constitute effective military doctrine, Yord said dismissively. You'd be surprised how often our fiction becomes reality, Cooper replied. But don't take my word for it. You will see for yourselves soon enough. A notification chimed on Captain Yors's communication device. Sergeant Major Greel's fleet has arrived. The real operation begins now, human. Your world's resistance will be brief and ultimately futile. Cooper met the captain's gaze steadily. We will see about that. From his communications station, Cadet Zorn watched as three massive battlecruisers emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing the inevitable victory. The largest, bearing the insignia of Sergeant Major Greel's personal command, took position directly above the initial landing site. Magnificent, aren't they? Sergeant Drax said, observing Zorn's reaction. Each of those ships carries enough firepower to level a continent. And Greel is known for using every weapon at his disposal. Is such overwhelming force really necessary? Zorn asked, then immediately regretted the question as Drax's compound eyes fixed on him with sudden intensity. You are developing a concerning pattern of doubt, Cadet, the veteran soldier noted. Perhaps you should be reminded that questioning military decisions during an active operation borders on insubordination. I meant no disrespect, Sergeant. Zorn backpedaled quickly. I'm simply trying to understand our strategic approach. Drax seemed mollified by this explanation. Strategy is simple, youngling. Overwhelming force applied decisively ends conflicts quickly and minimizes our casualties. The humans will surrender once they understand resistance is hopeless. And if they don't surrender, then they cease to be a concern, Drax replied coldly. Either way, the problem is solved. The communication system activated and a new voice filled the channel, deep, gravelly and unmistakably authoritative. Attention all Armada vessels. This is Sergeant Major Greel. Effective immediately, I am assuming command of Operation Earthfall. All units will synchronize to my tactical feed and prepare for coordinated deployment. Phase 1 begins in 30 minutes. Greel out. Sergeant Drax straightened. A new energy in his movements. Finally, some proper military action. Prepare yourself, Cadet. You are about to witness how the Galactic Armada truly operates. Zorn nodded, but his inner doubts only grew stronger. Something about this entire operation felt wrong, rushed and dangerously arrogant. The captured human's confidence continued to bother him, as did Science Officer Neela's repeated warnings about underestimating Earth's defenders. 30 minutes later, the invasion of Earth began in earnest. Wave after wave of troop carriers descended through the atmosphere, targeting major military installations across the landmass. The humans called North America. Zorn monitored the communications traffic, which initially reported successful landings and minimal resistance. Then, one by one, the reports began to change. Command, this is Drop Team 7. We've encountered unexpected resistance at the human military base. They were waiting for us with... Wait, are those electromagnetic pulse weapons? Our shields are the transmission cut off abruptly. Drop Team 12 requesting immediate air support. The humans are using some kind of adaptive jamming technology. We can't establish a secure perimeter. Command, be advised the human aircraft don't appear on our sensors until they are practically on top of us. They are using some kind of primitive but effective stealth technology. From the command deck, Sergeant Major Greel's voice boomed through the ship. All units, press the attack. These are primitive countermeasures at best. Our technology is superior in every way. But the situation reports continued to deteriorate. Human forces, rather than massing for conventional battles where the Armada's superior firepower would dominate, had broken into small, highly mobile units that struck quickly and then disappeared. They seemed to be targeting communication nodes, shield generators, and command personnel with uncanny precision. How do they know our vulnerabilities? Sergeant Drax muttered. His earlier confidence noticeably diminished as he listened to the reports flooding Zorn's station. Perhaps they are more observant than we anticipated, Zorn suggested carefully. Before Drax could respond, Science Officer Neela's voice cut into their channel. Cadet Zorn, report to the medical bay immediately. Captain Yorge's authorization. Drax looked suspicious but nodded his permission. Go. But return to your station as soon as possible. Zorn hurried through the corridors of the inevitable victory, passing crews rushing to battle stations and medical teams preparing for casualties. The ship, which had been relatively calm during the reconnaissance phase, now hummed with tension and urgency. When he arrived at the medical bay, he found an unusual scene. Captain Yords and Science Officer Neela stood near an examination table where a human, the one called Cooper, remained restrained but was now sitting upright. The other two humans were nowhere to be seen. Cadet Zorn reporting as ordered. Captain, he announced, trying to keep the confusion from his voice. Cadet, Yords acknowledged. Officer Neela informs me that you've expressed some concerns about our approach to this operation. Zorn felt his secondary heart begin to race.
What? Was this an insubordination charge?
Had Sergeant Drax reported him. I simply sought to understand our strategy, Captain, he replied carefully. And that curiosity is exactly why you are here, Neela interjected. Cadet Zorn, this human has made some claims about Earth's defensive capabilities that conflict with our intelligence. I believe your fresh perspective might help us evaluate these claims objectively. Zorn glanced at the human, who was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Despite being restrained and surrounded by aliens, Cooper showed no signs of fear or submission. What would you like me to do, Science Officer? Zorn asked. Listen, she said simply. Listen to what the human says, compare it with the battle reports you've been monitoring, and give us your unbiased assessment. Cooper spoke before Zorn could respond. Let me guess, things aren't going according to plan down there, are they? Your troops expected an easy fight, but they are getting their asses handed to them by a bunch of primitive monkeys. The operation is proceeding with some tactical adjustments, Captain Yords stated stiffly. Cooper laughed. That's military speak for we are getting slaughtered. Look, I tried to warn you. Humans don't fight fair. We don't follow the expected playbook, and we absolutely do not give up when the odds are against us. Our technological advantage, Yords began, means jack shit when my people start getting creative, Cooper interrupted. You think we haven't been preparing for this day? Every science fiction movie, every alien invasion scenario, every war game our military has run for decades has been building toward this moment. We've imagined fighting aliens in 1,000 different ways, and now we get to try them all out at once. Zorn found himself speaking before he could reconsider. The battle reports indicate the humans are using unexpected tactics and targeting critical systems with unusual precision. Of course we are, Cooper said. First rule of asymmetric warfare, never fight the enemy where they are strongest. We can't match your firepower, so we are not trying to. We are hitting communication nodes, shield generators, propulsion systems, all the vulnerable points of any advanced military force. But how could you possibly know those vulnerabilities? Captain Yours demanded. Cooper's expression was one of amused disbelief. Captain, we've been studying warfare for our entire existence. The principles don't change just because the technology does. Any military force, no matter how advanced, needs to communicate, needs to protect itself, and needs to move. Disrupt those capabilities, and even the most powerful army starts to fall apart. Neela's skin pulsed with colors that indicated intense thought. The human makes a valid point, Captain. Their historical records show remarkable adaptability in warfare. They consistently find ways to counter technologically superior opponents. This is different. Yoras insisted. The gap between our civilizations is too vast. Is it? Cooper challenged. Because from what I'm hearing, your troops are already facing weapons and tactics they weren't prepared for, and we are just getting started. A priority alert suddenly blared through the ship's communication system. Sergeant Major Greel's voice followed, noticeably less confident than before. All orbital units. Be advised. Human forces have deployed some form of crude but effective anti-spacecraft weaponry. We've lost 3 troop carriers and a support vessel. Maintain high orbit and await further instructions. Captain Yors's expression darkened. Impossible. Their weapons can't possibly reach our ships in orbit. Conventional weapons, no. Cooper agreed, but we've had plans for converting our nuclear arsenal for space warfare since the Cold War. Sounds like someone finally got to dust off those old contingency plans. Zorn watched as the realization dawned on Captain Yors's face. The humans weren't fighting according to any predictable doctrine. They were improvising, adapting, and using every resource at their disposal in ways the Armada's tactical computers couldn't anticipate. Cadet Zorn, Yord said suddenly. Your assessment? Zorn hesitated, knowing his answer could potentially end his career before it truly began, but something about the human's steady gaze compelled him toward honesty. Captain, the battle reports align with the human's claims. Our forces expected conventional resistance but encountered highly adaptive, unconventional tactics instead. Every time our commanders adjust their approach, the humans counter with unexpected responses. It's as if they've been preparing for this specific scenario for generations. We have been, Cooper confirmed. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical capabilities, it's our imagination. We've been fighting aliens in our minds long before you showed up. Another alert sounded, more urgent than the last. Sergeant Major Greel's voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. All units, fall back to defensive positions. Repeat, fall back. The humans have deployed some kind of biological agent that targets our respiratory systems. Medical teams standing by at all extraction points. Biological warfare. Yord's turned to Cooper. Genuine shock in his voice. Your species would resort to such tactics against invaders threatening our planet. Cooper replied evenly. Captain, there is nothing, absolutely nothing we won't do to protect our home. Rules of engagement go out the window when extinction is on the line. Science Officer Neela's skin had turned almost white with alarm. Captain, we need to reconsider this entire operation. The humans are demonstrating capabilities and resolve far beyond our initial assessment. Sergeant Major Greel would never authorize a retreat, Yord said, but his tone lacked conviction. As if in response to his statement, the ship-wide announcement system activated. Attention all Armada personnel. Due to unexpected tactical developments, Operation Earthfall is being temporarily suspended. All ground forces will withdraw to orbital positions immediately. Sergeant Major Greel has returned to the fleet command vessel for strategic reconsideration. The medical bay fell silent as the implications of the announcement sank in. The mighty galactic armada, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, had just been fought to a standstill by a pre-interstellar species using improvised weapons and tactics. He ran, Cooper said, breaking the silence. Your big bad Sergeant Major tucked tail and ran back to his ship when things got tough. A strategic redeployment. Yours corrected automatically, but his heart wasn't in it. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night, Cooper replied. But we both know what happened. Your forces expected an easy conquest and instead met an enemy willing to do absolutely anything to survive. That's the thing about cornered animals, Captain, they fight the hardest. Zorn watched as Captain Yoris struggled with this new reality. The captain had been one of the few voices urging caution from the beginning, but even he had never anticipated this level of resistance. What happens now? Zorn asked, the question directed at no one in particular. It was Cooper who answered. Now your leadership has a choice to make. They can double down, commit more forces, and see if overwhelming numbers can succeed where technology advantage failed. Or they can do the smart thing, leave, and warn the rest of the galaxy to give Earth a wide berth. The Galactic Armada doesn't retreat, George said, but his tone suggested he was reciting doctrine rather than expressing conviction. There's a first time for everything, Cooper replied. And trust me, Captain, if your forces return to Earth in greater numbers, we will be ready. Every minute you give us is another minute we spend figuring out how to kill you more effectively. Before anyone could respond, the ship's emergency system blared to life. Warning! Multiple, high-energy projectiles detected on approach vector, impact imminent. All personnel secure for evasive maneuvers. The artificial gravity shifted suddenly as the inevitable victory began emergency evasive procedures. Zun had to grab a nearby console to remain upright. They are targeting our ships in orbit now, Cooper observed, seemingly unfazed by the chaos. Told you we'd been planning for this. Captain Yours activated his communication device. Bridge, report. How are primitive projectiles reaching orbital altitude? The response came through clearly despite the ship's violent maneuvering. Not primitive, Captain. The humans have repurposed their space exploration rockets as weapons platforms. They are crude but effective, and our sensors have difficulty tracking them. Another violent lurch threw Zorn against a wall. Alarms blared throughout the medical bay. Hull breach detected in sectors 7 through 9. Emergency containment procedures initiated. Cooper's restraints automatically released during the emergency. A standard safety protocol. He stood up calmly, stretching as if awakening from a pleasant nap rather than in the midst of a spacecraft under attack. You should probably evacuate, he suggested to the stunned aliens. Based on those alarms, this ship isn't going to be habitable much longer. You knew this would happen, Yours accused, struggling to maintain his balance as the ship continued evasive maneuvers. I knew my people would fight back with everything they had, Cooper corrected. The specific methods. Those are just human ingenuity at work. Science Officer Neela made a decision. Captain, we need to abandon ship, and, she hesitated, then continued firmly, we need to recommend full withdrawal from Earth to Commander Vesix. Neela, that's the only logical course of action, she finished for him. We severely underestimated this species. Continuing this invasion will result in catastrophic losses for minimal gain. Another explosion rocked the ship, closer this time. The lights flickered and emergency power activated, critical system failure imminent. All personnel proceed to evacuation pods immediately. Captain Yours looked at Cooper, then at Zorn and Neela. His military discipline warred visibly with the reality of their situation. Very well, he said finally, evacuation protocol initiated. And the human comes with us. As a prisoner? Cooper asked, though he didn't seem particularly concerned about the answer. As a consultant, Yours replied, surprising everyone, the Armada needs to understand what we are dealing with here. As they rushed toward the evacuation pods, dodging falling debris and panicked crew members, Zorn found himself alongside Cooper. Your people fought better than anyone expected, the young cadet admitted. Cooper glanced at him, a knowing look in his eyes. That's the thing about humans, kid. We are at our best when everyone expects us to fail. Your commanders made the oldest mistake in the book. What's that? They judged us by our technology, not by our resolve, Cooper explained. They looked at our weapons and saw primitives. They should have looked at our history and seen survivors. As they reached the evacuation pods, a final ship-wide transmission came through Commander Vazix himself, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. All Armada forces disengage from Earth immediately. Repeat, all forces disengage. Full tactical withdrawal authorized. This operation is suspended until further notice. Cooper smiled as he stepped into the evacuation pod alongside the aliens. Suspended, huh? That's a funny way of saying we surrender. This isn't over, human. Captain Yoras warned as the pod's door sealed. Oh, I know, Cooper replied, strapping himself in with the casual confidence of a man who'd been in far worse situations. But the next time you folks come calling, just remember how it went this time. And maybe, just maybe, consider knocking politely instead of kicking in the door. As the evacuation pod launched away from the failing inevitable victory, Cadet Zorn looked through the viewport at the blue-green planet below. From this distance it looked so peaceful, so harmless, yet its inhabitants had just delivered the first significant defeat the Galactic Armada had suffered in generations. The humans had been severely underestimated, their potential for resistance dismissed with laughter and mockery. No one in the Armada was laughing now. Commander Vizix would have to explain to the Imperial hierarchy how a pre-interstellar species had repelled their forces, Sergeant Major Greel would have to account for the losses under his command, and the Galactic Armada would have to reconsider its entire approach to expanding the Empire's boundaries. All because they had laughed at the human soldier, then stopped laughing when they discovered what humans were truly capable of when threatened. You know, Cooper said conversationally as their pod accelerated toward the rendezvous point with the fleet command vessel. There's an old saying on Earth, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Science Officer Neela looked puzzled. I don't understand the reference. It means, Cooper explained with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and predatory, that determination matters more than advantages. Your armada might have bigger guns, faster ships, and fancier technology. But humans, we've got something you can't measure on your scanners. And what's that? Captain Yoras asked despite himself. Cooper's smile widened. Spite. Pure, unadulterated spite. Push us to the edge. And we don't just fight back. We make sure you regret ever trying. The evacuation pod fell silent as the aliens contemplated this unsettling insight into humanity's psyche. Cadet Zorn, monitoring the communication channel, heard the reports continuing to flow in, more ships damaged, ground forces in disarray, human resistance intensifying rather than weakening. They had indeed severely underestimated the human soldier, an error that had cost the Galactic Armada dearly and one they wouldn't make again. The next time they encountered humans among the stars, there would be no laughter, only respect tinged with the memory of the day when the galaxy's most powerful military force learned that technology alone doesn't determine the outcome of a fight. Sometimes it's the species everyone dismisses as primitive that proves to be the most dangerous of all.